Welcome to another episode of the Warriors Walk. I'm Keith and this is Todd. And today we're going to be talking about marriage milestones and how to navigate different transitions that you may face in your marriage. So stay tuned. Now, Todd, we are in two different stages of life and even our marriage. So I've been married. We'll be celebrating 18 years. So we're finally almost like an adult marriage, like 18 years old. And so you and Nancy have been married for how long?
We've been chasing each other for 38 years.
Wow. So probably twice as long as I've been alive, which is just phenomenal. And so with that, we've definitely faced some different marriage transitions and navigating different stages of life. And so we wanted to do an episode on this because it can be difficult because each new stage or new transition we have is exactly that. It's new, right? Mm-hmm. It's new. And so we've seen the value as pastors of having people as mentors and we've tried to connect people with people from different stages of marriage, because even just with parenting, as we've talked about before, like having other people that have gone through similar stages really helps. And so we're going to be talking about how to navigate those different years. Any transition stage or a different stage of your marriage that has been your favorite? Would you be as bold to say like, okay, no, this has been our favorite season that we've gone through?
Wow, that's a good question. That wasn't in the script. So I don't know if I have a favorite. I think certainly injecting kids. We had kids early. We were that couple that were like, we got a 10-year plan, and once we get here, we'll be financially set. And God laughed at us, and first year of marriage, congratulations, you got a boy. And so I don't think we had a lot of the pre-kid stage marriage, and so that's just like fiction for us.
Yeah.
And so, but I think having kids was a joy. My wife would echo the same thing. Like, we enjoy being mom and dad, and I would say the difference now is like, when the kids were living with us and when they were little, we were the authority figures. And now that they're all married, we're coaches.
Yeah.
But what's cool is when you develop and keep that relationship, they check in with you. Like even today, my son called me, as he's driving with one of the granddaughters, and just, it was cool, like to be able to coach him and care for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, would you say that you're enjoying being a grandparent more than the same age parent? Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you said how amazing it is because you can just like hand them back. It's like there's the fun aspect and spoiling, but then
I would say, even though that as much as that's the fun thing to say, like, yeah, get them all juiced up on sugar and then give them back, I think it's just you've learned to relax on the things that are not that important, and so you're not as stressed. Like if there are tears, if there is discipline issues, like you're just in a different place. And you're majoring in the majors. You know how to love differently. And so, it's a gift. Yeah. It really is. It's awesome.
Well, I remember when talking about like different seasons or different transitions, like to different seasons. So I remember, so Carolyn and I, we dated for 5.5 years before we got married. So we really kind of grew up together, like we're high school sweethearts. We knew each other fairly well before we got married. So it wasn't just like this, oh wow, like this is reality now. Marriage is, we obviously had to adjust and stuff when we get married, but I remember, and by the way, we don't really like fight. Like, it's not like we have like these huge blown up like arguments or like where we're probably more pouters than we are. Yeah. It's like, we don't talk to each other for like an hour. It's like, all right, what's wrong? It's like, okay, well, let's talk about it. But I remember we had this disagreement. It was like the first time, like in our marriage, like in our honeymoon stage, where it was just like, okay, this is now real. Like, this is real. And I was like, man, this is great. Like, being married to Caroline is just so amazing. And I remember like we were praying one night and she had prayed. She was like, well, now, Lord, I know that we're kind of, getting out of the honeymoon stage, of marriage. And I remember thinking distinctively, like, we are? Like, is this not as fun for her as it is for me? And I was like, this is a new reality. Okay. Like, I think we are moving past the, like, the giddy, like, we're married. Like,
oh yeah.
And it became like a reality. It's like, okay, we're in this, like, this is going to, like, we're going to work through things. We're going to be, doing the hard things. And so I remember that distinctive switch, and we ended up, we got married pretty young, but then we didn't have kids for 5 years. But ours was like a 10-year, but we were like, oh yeah, we're going to wait for 10 years since we got married so young. And then like around the 5-year mark, we were like, okay, we're ready to have kids. And And it was funny because we had to figure that out. Like, we're like, well, we had said 10 years, so I don't know if I'm going to be the one to bring it up. And then we both brought it up. We're like, that's what I was thinking too. Let's start to have kids now. So with that, there's different seasons of marriage or different milestones. What would you say, like, if you had to divide them out, like, what would be the different milestones? We talked a little bit about this, but you kind of have the pre-children stage, which was very short for you guys.
Right.
Which I think you remember, there was a guy on our staff, a youth staff, that they got pregnant on their honeymoon. Do you remember this with twins?
Yeah.
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 And so, yeah, we had, that was like a big surprise for them. So you have the pre-children stage, which is critical for establishing that strong marriage, of course, a strong foundation of marriage. Then you have the with children. So, of course, that could be different ages, children. And you have to really prioritize the adjustment, right? Because I remember when we started to have our boys, it was like, we are already a family, and now we're adding to a family. It's something that we kind of correct in other people. It's like, well, we've been married for a few years. Now we're ready to start a family. I'm like, hold on. You're already a family, and you're just now adding to your family.
And that's good before you leave that. I mean, for those listening, because we got a lot of friends that are married and they can't have kids, right?
Yep.
And so we want to be sensitive to that. And again, like, it is one of those things where, and then I've met couples that actually have no desire to have kids, right? And then I've even met couples in the church that they've chosen, rather than biologically to have kids, to adopt or foster.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways to go about this, but yeah, I would definitely say, since this is about marriage, like, kids is certainly a factor. That would be that second stage, right? Like pre-kids, with kids.
I would even say, like, maybe even not call it pre-children, but like without children so far, like, because that might be a conscious choice, or, because of different reasons. So not necessarily pre-children, like the expectation is children.
Yeah.
But to really, where there's just the two of you, and to realize that you're a family before you would add to it, even with children. So,
well, that gets you to land on the last stage, if we're breaking them into thirds, right? And that would be that empty nester stage. I mean, you start off without kids, and if you choose to have them, and then eventually, like, they do usually leave, and so then again, like, that's a whole nother game plan there too.
Yeah, definitely. And so each of those stages bring different challenges, and as you look back, so now that you're in the empty nester stage, even though you have some kids that live closely but not like with you, what are some things? Because we're in the with kids, still young. We just entered our oldest is now a teenager, so that's a new stage that we're entering in. But we still have a 4-year-old, so we're still pretty spread out when it comes to like different ages of our kids. But what are some unique challenges that someone who has toddlers, say, or young kids, we'll just say like maybe under 10 years old, what are some unique challenges that they face that empty nesters might not be going through right now?
So, I mean, obviously you can speak to this too, but I think one of the biggest challenges is to continue to invest in your spouse, right? Because kids, they're going to clamor for your attention around the clock, right? And so, and rightfully so, they need your attention, they need your care. But if you're not intentional about loving, specifically talking to guys here, if you're not intentional about dating your wife and loving on her, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think, Ephesians 5:25, it's this model scripturally of, like, just like Christ gave his life for the church, like, husbands are called to do the same for their wives. And there's a great book called Love and Respect. And I think, in general, it summarizes how men and women are. I mean, there's going to be variables that are different, but most men crave to be respected by their wives, and most women crave that love from their husbands. And so I would just encourage those with toddlers, like, yes, like, do life together, love on those little ones, but make sure you make time for each other. And that's going to look different depending on jobs and all that.
That's what I was going to ask is, should couples prioritize a weekly date night where they actually go out, dinner, movie, whatever?
Yeah. And I think, again, rather than get legalistic about it, because I know how some people are wired. Like, if I say, like, yes, every Friday you should go out, they're like, oh, we're doing something wrong. And so, I mean, it is what it is. Like, just like I know it's good for us to be in the Word and to pray together as a husband and wife. But there's nights, like even last night as an example, like my wife was just like raring to go and wanted to watch TV, and I was like, I'm going to bed. So like not every night do we sync up and, go to bed and pray, and that's the anomaly for us. Like it's a one-off. But I would say, like, yeah, I don't know I think everybody's different, but my wife and I for the first 12 years, like we were dating with kids all around us. And it wasn't really until our oldest was 12 that we started sneaking out and going out for a coffee date or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't say that was right necessarily. That's just how it worked for us.
Yeah.
But we were also intentional in that, like the dinner table, like was a big deal. And so we would gather there, and then our kids went to bed fairly early. So we usually carved out at least a couple hours in the evening.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, so, I remember early on, like even with having kids, we felt the pressure where it's like, we have to go, like when we didn't have kids, it was easier to just like, hey, we're going to go out to dinner, or like we'd cook a meal together. Like we basically, like every night was date night, because it's like we would have dinner together or whatever by ourselves, like primarily. And so, so when we had kids, we felt like this weird pressure or tension where it's like, okay, if you're not really having a date night, like you're not really serious about your marriage. But we were like, every time we went out, it was like, we have to spend money. We have to like work out the logistics of, who's watching the boys and all. And so it became, I was like, do you want to do this? It's like, no, not really. It's like, I want to spend time with you, but we don't have to go out to do, And so I would just say intentionality is huge. Not necessarily like you have to go, dress up and, like we still enjoy like a date night occasionally, but it's pretty rare, like for us to see, like, we need to do this,
Well, there's other ways you can pursue each other, right? Like I love like writing little notes for my wife or something like that, or even an occasional gift. I mean, there's just different things you can do that say, hey, I see you, I love you, I care about you. And that's where I would, encourage people. The book's been out for a long time, but the 5 love languages, and figuring out what actually feels like love for your spouse, right? Yeah. And so that's worth exploring and even understanding. Sometimes it's just, sometimes a husband or wife just wants time with the other, right? And they don't need any elaborate gifts. As a matter of fact, they don't even care.
Yeah, it's huge.
Just depends.
Yeah. And so when it comes to, that intentionality, I mean, like even this morning, we were kind of surprised. We both got up, and usually like our boys are up pretty early too. And we both got up and we like made breakfast, and we're like, it's kind of like our own little date, because no one else is awake yet. So we're drinking coffee, eating breakfast. It was lovely. We didn't have to get dressed up and go out or anything. And it does help, that Caroline and I, we work together too. So we see each other more frequently than most maybe. But okay, so rival children, it brings joy and new responsibilities, but it does require the couples to balance that prioritize that time alone with each other, whether that's, whether you have to get dressed up and go out, whatever, if that's your thing. But there's a new focus now where, in Proverbs 22:6, it says to train up a child in the way that it should go. Even when he's old, he'll not depart from it. So we want to have that focus where we're investing and on the same page with a parenting strategy or to disciple our kids. And this is something that we've really, I think, grown in a lot. Because I've mentioned before, like I think we did an episode of this when we talked about parenting, but how I feel like so insecure about parenting or about like discipling in my own home, which is kind of ironic because I'm a pastor, but I feel like it's my job. And so when I'm at home, I don't want to work, so to speak. Like, so I feel like this weird, like, have you started with that too? Or are you superhuman and you're like awesome? And I mean, yeah, I don't know. For me, it's been very like, I have to intentionally fight against that. Like that feeling of like, oh, I'm only doing this because it's my job. Like, gotcha. When I want to do it. Like I want to, and I want to serve the Lord. And so, so Caroline's been amazing at that. Like I've really, like, I mean, she listens to tons of great podcasts and we've talked about this before too, about like how she's almost like my filter for different, like, and she's like, okay, you need to really read this book, 'cause it's really good. And I'm like, oh yes, like this. Okay. And so with that, like, what was the balance there for you? Like, I guess being a Navy SEAL, you don't really bring your work home a lot, hopefully. But that's the temptation for me now in this stage, is bringing my work home, so to speak, where they say like whatever you do for a living, you typically don't do at home. So that's why you have like mechanics with cars up on blocks. Yeah, carpenter. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's where I don't want to just excuse that, but that's a temptation that I have where I almost like shy away from spiritually leading my boys because I feel like it's work sometimes. But yeah.
I guess I have a different view on just, my life, and that before marriage, before kids, being involved in a couple conflicts and war and seeing that life was brief, and then just being gone so much in marriage and then leaving the children behind. When I was home, and I think my wife would echo this, I know, she just said, like, you did a good job of being present. And I was a big fan and still am of Deuteronomy 6 for guidelines for parents. Like, it is this idea of like, when you're rising up, when you're walking with them, when you're, driving in your vehicle, and you're laying down at night, modern interpretation there.
Yeah.
But like to do life with your kids. And so I felt like I wanted to be intentional because I knew my time was brief with them. And I also, not to be morbid, but like I really didn't know if like I was going to have more time with them. So it just meant a lot to me. But I would also say I felt the same way about marriage, and again, the focus of our time here is, on marriage. And so co-parenting and like being on the same sheet is a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't want to correct each other in front of the kids because they're smart and they'll figure out how to play you and game you all day long. So you got to have a battle strategy or those kids will dissect you and they'll win.
Yeah.
Right? So,
well, and that's where, we definitely take seriously where it's like, one of our, I was about to say his name, but I won't.
Yeah, good call.
One of our boys would come up to us and ask us something. And I'm like, I thought I overheard you asking mom that already.
Mm-hmm.
What did she say? Well, she said this. I'm like, and you thought you're going to get a different response out of me, So, so there's definitely that kind of playing each other against each other. That can happen. So, okay. So empty nest is like kind of the third stage, and you kind of categorize this as like rediscovering yourselves. And I've seen this happen so many times. It seemed like I had a lot of friends that I grew up with that when their parents entered the empty nest stage, they were divorced. Like cause their sole focus for, however many years had just been on the kids that they neglected their marriage for so long. And so what are some tips or advice that you would offer empty nesters out there that might be rediscovering their marriage or trying to fight for it right now?
Right. So a couple things, like even just looking at the progression here, it doesn't happen. Like it's not a blowout, right? It's a slow leak. If you don't recognize it, like if you're investing all your time and energy in elevating your children above your marriage, you're setting yourself up for failure when those kids leave, because then you're not going to know each other. And all of a sudden you're like, who's this stranger that I'm spending all this time with? And I think my wife and I, we kind of had the double whammy in that, like, I was gone for most of those years. And then when I went into ministry and the kids left at the same time, it was like, all right, who are you? Like, who's this guy? And wait a minute, you want to pay the bills too? Like, I got a system. And so it was really rediscovering each other and really relearning each other. And there's a lot of other variables we don't have time to unpack, but both men and women, when they usually get to this age, they got medical problems usually. Mm-hmm. So you got that variable that's inserted into the equation. And I think it's just so important to be curious about each other, right? And then realizing you're probably not the same person that you married all those years ago, right? And that, your likes have changed, and so even just figuring those things out, and it sounds cheesy, but I've gone through that Q&A with my wife, like, so what's your favorite color now? And what do you like about this? And really, like, what's your favorite food? And just starting over. Yeah. And then I think that's really good for you. And thankfully, like my wife and I, we never elevated the kids above the marriage. And we made sure the kids knew that, like, hey, like mom and I, like, we're going to be together. You guys are going to leave. And it goes into the, we talked about this in parenting, but there's a season where you are that authority figure in their life. But where I see parents mess up and then it impacts their marriages when they actually still think they're the authority figure after they leave. Mm-hmm. Like, now you're a coach. Yeah. And you can give guidance, but they're going to make their own calls. Yep. Because that's what you wanted to do when you got married too. Like, you don't want your parents telling you what to do. Like, I'm married. Mm. And so I would just say, like, a really helpful thing is to be curious, and then really falling back on, was it Philippians 2:3, seeing your spouse as more significant than yourselves. Like, practicing that humility is so good. I know when I find myself getting frustrated, it's usually because I'm not seeing my wife as more important than me. Mm. And that's a good auto correction too. I think it's good for both husband and wives to remember that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's transition here to some rapid fire questions. One that I'm going to surprise you with that's not on our list that you've seen. So I'm curious, in your house, do you have a favorite chore that you do at home?
A favorite chore. Lately, not always, but lately, my thing is I like knocking out laundry before I actually go to work. So I get up quite a bit earlier than my wife. So I'll knock out my workout, and then I'll take the existing clothes from the day before, and I'll get all those done. And like today, I choked. I didn't get them all dried in time and folded. But It's almost like an OCD thing now. Like, I just want the laundry done before I leave the house. And that's kind of like a gift I'm trying to give to my wife.
Yeah.
Like, hey, that's one thing you don't have to worry about today.
That's great.
And so I think laundry is a big one that I'm into now.
Do you have one that is your least favorite?
I don't know if I have a least favorite. Like, I'm game for most things. I think it's just really like how you're feeling. Like, I'm not the best guy to do chores when I come home at night.
Yeah.
I'm a morning guy. Like, you give me chores, like, I can knock them out all day long in the morning. But like after a full day of work, or like today being a Wednesday, you and I hanging out, like we're here till, and get home at 10 p.m. Probably not your chore guy at 10.
Yeah. Well, we're in a good season where we have workers to help now.
Yes,
so,
you do.
so we have chores that they're doing. But one thing that I do not like is laundry. So it's interesting that so that's I mean, for me, it overwhelms me when there's a big pile of laundry and I have to figure out it because I don't know my boys' sizes and all that stuff. So when it comes to like who's, I'm like, Caroline knows that stuff a lot more, but Hudson, our oldest, is our laundry dude now. So we've outsourced that. So I don't know what we're going to do. We'll have significantly less laundry once the boys are out of the house, but.
Here's a pro tip. As an empty nester, knowing how petite your wife is and how petite my wife is, like it's pretty easy to differentiate.
I'll be able to tell whose clothes are whose. Yeah. For sure.
I've got that down. I did not do laundry.
But when there's like, like a year or two, like, in the sizes difference, I'm like, I think I've seen Clive wear that.
Glad that they kind of match.
Yeah. So then, the laundry though has been overwhelming for me, but I can do kitchen chores all day long. Like, dishes and even cooking, cleaning the kitchen. I enjoy that. All right. So this next question, what advice would you give to a single Christian who wants to get married?
This one actually I think is not that complicated. Right beside you, I have my grandfather's yoke. And like, not only is it in God's word, but like you don't want to be unequally yoked. Like I know, and we deal with so many young adults, right, that they feel like the time's running out, like, and and then what happens is they start compromising on their standards. I would say, do not compromise. Like, make sure you marry someone with the same belief system, because if God blesses you with children, like, what a nightmare if you both don't agree on your faith. And then how do you raise a child? And I just take your time and be patient with it, and do not rush to failure by compromising on God's standards.
It's huge. Yeah. Yeah, I'd echo the same thing. Yeah, there's one tendency to be, I think they call it like the princess syndrome, where it's like, I'm waiting for my knight in shining out honor, like where you have such high standards that it's never going to be realistic. Right. But then I see this happen more so, is that people just compromise and like, well, it doesn't have to be like a believer, like maybe just say that he's a Christian but not really like following the Lord, like he's growing, and they're like so I would definitely.
Well, here's a false teaching out there, right? And it tends to be more women will fall into this line, but certainly guys have too, and they're like, well, I'll fix them, and
missionary,
it's like, you don't want to marry a fixer upper. Like, marry someone, because what I've told people too, like I've actually met with people, not many, but after meeting with them, I'm like, I actually don't think you guys should get married, because like you're dating and you don't even like each other. Like, it's not going to get better when you get married. Yeah. Like, they think like putting a ring on all of a sudden is going to solve all their hate issues, and just seeing all these fights like while they're dating, I'm like, I think maybe you should rethink whether or not you should be married.
Yeah.
Like, you're not even friends now.
Well, and don't decide things in a vacuum too. I mean, we see a lot of couples that rush into things where it's like, did you talk to anybody about this? Like, do you have, like, are you involved in Christian community enough to where you can get wise counsel, people that know you well, know them well? And
we've both seen that. Like, I think one of the biggest heartaches, for those listening, that we've both observed is to see a husband and wife, just a marriage implode, and then to see one of those spouses turn around and marry the exact same person within a year. Yeah. Like, it's so sad to watch.
Yeah. All right. So this next question is a lot lighter. Do you drink soda?
I don't.
And if you did though, or like, have you ever, like, did you have a favorite soda growing up or something like that? Like,
well, we'll go back to the Frosty root beer days, because that was the sponsor of my baseball team in grade school. And so,
started at a young age. Yeah.
So
but now you don't drink any soda though.
I mean, I wouldn't use the word never, but it It's only like if somehow you get in a restaurant and they don't have water and they don't have anything else. Like, you know how you'll say,
if they don't have water, you got something else.
You're just like, all right. Like or like in a foreign land, you know, sometimes the water's not maybe the best choice. And so then I've dabbled in, bottled sodas or something like that I think is safer.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. I'm not a huge, I don't drink soda really either, but sparkling water has become pretty refreshing though, that we keep on. Not on tap, but on hand.
My grandkids call sparkling water spicy water.
Yeah.
They like the
for kids,
water.
It's like it's spicy.
Actually, they don't like
spicy.
it at all.
Yeah. All right. So, what kind of nutrition did the SEALs use to maintain top performance? I'm guessing not frosty root beer.
Pretty much not frosty root beer. I mean, it was interesting. I remember when I was older, we had a nutritionist come in one time, and she did a good job. She put 2 Happy Meals in front of the young SEALs at the team. And I didn't coordinate this. I just happened to stop by and watch. And she just said, "Tell me the difference between these 2 Happy Meals." And everyone's staring at her like, "I don't know." She's like, "I bought this one 10 years ago."
Oh.
And you couldn't tell the difference. She goes, "Because it's not food."
Yeah.
Like, it's just this processed chemical stuff.
Yeah.
So that was kind of illuminating to see, like, chicken nuggets from 10 years ago look like chicken nuggets fried today.
Yeah.
Same with the French fries. But today the teams they continue to evolve as far as, how to do nutrition and stuff. I think the best advice I received when I was in was from a guy named Mark Twight. He's pretty famous. He's climbed all the 8,000 meter peaks in the world and did some pretty hardcore training. He trained all the actors for the 300 movie.
Yeah.
And so he's an elite, nutrition guy and a fitness guy, but he would actually help us understand like what to eat while we're in the field. And so he was a big fan of like save the fats and the protein for your evening meal and just easy to digest carbs while you're on the move, because your body really can't process the fat and the proteins if you're carrying 120 pounds on your back, 80 on your chest and skiing. Like he's like just goo and like simple carbs that you can process quickly. So I think that was good advice. But yeah, I think for nighttime is when we saved up those big heavy meals.
Nice. Yeah. Now, speaking of meals, what was the best MRE option?
Man, so many memories.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you've probably eaten quite a few over the years.
I have. And I'll just give a shout out to the Army Rangers. Like if there's one group on planet Earth, because part of, the Rangers listening, they know this, but if you don't know much about them, like synonymous with going through Ranger school is also the word starvation. Like they starve those guys. And we used to send junior officers there and they would come back malnourished. Like they look like POW victims. Like they don't feed them, but they learned how to maximize the peanut butter, the accessory peanut butter and MRE. They could do magic with that. And it was like a gold bar in the field. Like you traded that, you could get several MREs just for peanut butter. Right. And so I think everyone has their favorites. I actually could digest and eat those dehydrated pork patties, and people would give those to me all day long. And so everybody had their little niche, but ultimately my favorite was, especially when I lived in Alaska and I was an instructor there, I made my own. And I just took freezer bags and I put a cup of rice in there and I chop up like some of them cheesy dogs, which is not food, but it tasted good. And I put like a cup of Lipton soup in there. And then I just added hot water, and the bag could handle the boiling hot water. I'd stir it up, let it sit for 5 minutes. I'd eat it, and then all the trash I had was a Ziploc bag, and I could roll it up. And it was just easy, really, to maintain a low, footprint, and so you didn't leave anything behind. And I thought that was a clever way to eat, and it showed because I didn't lose any weight when I was in the field. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, my only experience with them. Obviously, I wasn't in the military, but we used to use them for camping and stuff occasionally, and which now when I think about like that would be the last on my list of things. Like we're going camping, let's get some MREs.
Way down on my list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and my dad would get them at the surplus store or something, and yeah,
it's a good box to check though. For
exactly, for sure. Now, what is a cool story? I don't know if we haven't talked about this since, but we recently were at the Museum of the Bible for a concert.
Yep.
And do you remember a specific cool story that we heard while we were at the Museum of the Bible?
Yeah, I do. So Brooke, was it Ligerwood? I always choke on her last name. She shared a cool story of a pastor friend who texted her, and I believe the time frame was, she said 25 years ago to the day, they walked around and they put a stake in the ground where the Museum of the Bible was, and asking God specifically for the Word of God to go forward from there. They wanted to plant a church.
Yeah.
And they were denied to plant a church, but she said, isn't it cool that God's plans were much bigger than ours? So now that's where the Museum of the Bible is, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was a phenomenal story of just their prayers were answered, but in a much different way.
Yeah.
And what isn't that telling? Like, I think a lot of us limit God on what he can do and forget that he's the king of the universe.
Yeah. That's huge. Yeah, that was a phenomenal story. And speaking of the universe, you have a survival tip for us that helps us to navigate.
It's true. It's true.
Did you like that? Did you like that transition? I thought about that.
Smooth. I mean, that'll probably get you at least 2 likes on.
All right. So survival tip about navigation. So tell us what you got.
So as much as technology has evolved and GPSs are definitely a great tool out there, I think it's really wise to learn how to use a map and compass. They're so valuable. And man, I worked with a guy named Johnny in Kodiak, Alaska, and he was a sniper in his previous platoon and a point man. And he was so gifted. Some people are just another level on how they can read maps. And so he was exceptional, but it took me a lot of years to be able to read maps like he could naturally. But I would say map and compass skills along with learning your pace. So everybody has a different pace. So you have a pace count, and ideally you count on one leg. So maybe if you step off on your right, then you count your left. And then you have so many for 100 yards or 100 meters, whatever you're working on in that map. But then you also want to test it going down steep terrain and up terrain. And your pace count's going to change. Your pace count changes also depending on what you're carrying, right? It changes in the snow. It changes on all these different variables. But then also learn how to do a GPS. And of course, like when we're overseas, I mean, we're using GPSs and they're encrypted so the enemy can't spoof them and all that stuff. But knowing how to navigate is a huge skill. And not only on land, but water too. And obviously then you're using charts. And both those skills have just, in my career, because I mean, when I first started, we didn't use GPSs at all. And GPS was a game changer. Like when we used to do ducks, which is where you throw boats out and then you parachute after your boats. And obviously they have a parachute on there too. But you would, once you got done, the pilots did the best they could to drop you on an X wherever you wanted to come out, but you don't know, right? You're in the middle of this black ocean at night. Then you start motoring with your compass, and all we had was like little handheld compasses. And so you're just motoring along, and you're like, hope's the method, right? Like, and they're like, is this the right beach? I don't know. Like, we're going to find out. I wonder if we'll get contacted, you know? So now if a GPS, like it can autocorrect and you know exactly where you're going to land. So, but there could be a scenario in the future where, you know, GPSs go down because you need satellites. So who knows?
Good to have analog. Yeah.
I think you need to have the old skills.
Yep.
And even, I would even just go one step further. It would not be a bad idea to at least have a generic map in your car in case those GPSs go down. I don't think many people use maps anymore.
Which there was a time where my brother and I went backpacking and we felt so confident that we didn't bring a map. We brought a compass, which doesn't really help a whole lot without a map. And so we just left the map in the car. We had one left in the car at the trailhead. And we got lost. Spent an extra day in the woods, but we're alive today. So
that's where movies come from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We were probably another day of having a movie made about us. So it was definitely terrifying for our family. But
good thing you didn't have to eat you.
Yeah, we were getting a little low on food, but we packed in a lot, so we were good. But yeah. Well, with that, we come to a close of another episode. So thank you so much for joining us for the Warriors Walk. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. If you would like and comment, it always helps more people to see it. But we've noticed that a lot of our viewers aren't subscribed yet to our YouTube channel. So if you're listening to this on podcasts, you can always subscribe to our podcast so that you won't miss a future one. So thank you so much for your support as we've grown this channel and have impacted more people. And so we want to continue to do that. So we'd be honored if you shared this with someone else. So if you even screenshot this, if you're listening to it or watching it, share it to a social media platform. It always helps us to grow. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.